and welcome to Skullface Horror Stories. This is where you come when you and yours want to get scared. This video is a collaboration between me and one of my favorite fellow horror narrators. His name is As the Raven Dreams, and you can find his channel in the description. The two of us are going to tell you 4 true, scary stories about creeps and weirdos on your property. I was living in a rural area in Oklahoma with my mom at a small lake house, and I'm probably 10 or 11 at this point. One night I'm sleeping in my room when I randomly and abruptly wake up for no reason. This wasn't normal for me, and I felt very uneasy. The only sound I could hear was my mother snoring in the next room on the couch. I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep, but my need to use the bathroom was growing more urgent, so I grudgingly forced myself to head that way. The bathroom is on the other side of the house, around a corner, past the kitchen, and finally down a long hallway on the right. So, after I made the trip and finished my business, I flipped off the light switch and started heading back to bed. That's when I heard the distinct click of the light switch, and I saw the glow of the bathroom light in the hallway. Terrified, I slowly turned around just to witness the light in the bathroom start clicking on and off. Click, 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 click. Finally, it shut completely off. In the dark of the hallway, my eyes began to make out a white shape near the end of the hall. It was around my size and crouched to the floor. At this point, I'm frozen to the spot as my mind begins realizing that no one else is home except for my mom and myself. Then the white shape began whispering in a quiet man's voice, "Help me, I'm lost." I remember wanting to scream for my mom, but I couldn't. And instead, I barely said, "No," before this thing starts running at me on what sounded like all fours. I quickly ran through the kitchen and around the corner before running to my sleeping mom, shaking her awake. I remember saying, "It's coming, it's coming," and my mother's eyes going from dazed to alert in an instant. She asked me what was going on, and I saw her eyes look over my shoulder before she screamed. Remembering her scream still makes my blood run cold. Never had I heard pure terror like that in my life, even to this day. She grabs me by my arm and pulls me into my room and slams the door. She holds me in her arms with her back pressed against the door as we listen. It sounded like this thing was running around in circles in the kitchen. We could hear hands and feet slapping against the tile. The kitchen had a sliding glass door to the outside, which sounded like it was thrown open, then slammed. We sat there horrified until daybreak. I was sent to my grandmother's in the next town for a while after that, and never set foot in that house again. Years later, my mother said she went walking around the property after the incident and came across a small burial site with 3 headstones that each belonged to children from the early 1900s. It freaks me out because what I heard that night was a man's voice, but it was so unnatural. My mom still won't tell me what she saw behind me and what it was that made her scream like that. She tells me she's afraid it'll know we're talking about it and it'll come back. This is the first of many weird things that have happened in my life.
About 4 months ago, I began to hear strange things from friends around my neighborhood. For context, I'm 17 and I live in a nice and expensive neighborhood with my mother and sister. Around 5 every day, I would take my dog out to a nearby park, where there would be around 5 to 10 people there with their dogs every day at the same time. I would have casual conversations with the occasional political argument, but for the most part, it was all very casual and relaxed. One day, I arrived at the park with my dog who was eager to play. I walked in and said hello. I knew almost everyone there and had memorized all the names of their dogs. I walked into a conversation about a strange occurrence that had been happening around the neighborhood. I hear first-hand accounts of strange and terrifying things that have been happening in people's backyards. I hear about someone who swears they say someone ran through their backyard in the middle of the night. I hear someone say that they walked out to their backyard to find a dead squirrel in human feces. I also hear about one guy who says that he walked out with his dog into his backyard at night only for his dog to start frantically barking and cowering for no apparent reason. All these people live about 30 seconds away from me, so naturally, I was interested and quite worried. I get home that day and talk to my mother about all this, and she tells me how she has been seeing many sketchy people around lately. At the time, I had been given lots of homework from school, so I ignored it, hoping nothing would happen to us. A few weeks later, I'm on Christmas break and have 2 weeks off school. I'm sleeping at 4 a.m. every night and playing lots of video games. One night, I hear my phone vibrating. I got up to check it and see that it's my sister. I answer to hear her frantically telling me to come downstairs. I get up from my desk and run downstairs to see if everything is okay. As soon as I get down there, I see both my cats and my dog staring out into my backyard, and my sister standing back in fear. I run up to her, and I ask her if everything is okay, knowing that something is clearly wrong. She tells me in vivid detail how she was doing work on her laptop when she sees her dog get up and then bark at the window. She says that when she looked out, she saw a tall figure staring directly into the house. I immediately ran and grabbed a baseball bat and ran back to the window. For the next 30 minutes, my sister and I stared out into the pitch black in complete silence. As I clenched the bat, I thought about what could have happened. Could it have been nothing? Could it have been an animal that my sister thought was a person? Because I never saw anything, so I couldn't tell you. All I know is that the look on my sister's and my pet's faces meant that something was out there.
When I was in high school, we used to spend most of our time at our friend Tim's house. He had by far the biggest house among our friend group, and a rather large and modern house for the rural area we lived in. One very cool feature was an upstairs loft and game room, complete with huge windows that overlooked the expansive front yard and cornfields beyond. The house didn't have any close neighbors, so it was an ideal party location. One night, probably around 1 a.m., we were playing PlayStation 2 when our one buddy went to the window for a smoke. He lit up and stood looking out the window before quickly putting out the cigarette he had just lit. He beckoned us to the window and ducked down beneath the sill. From the window, we could see a man standing roughly 40 yards from the house in the middle of the front yard. He was staring directly up at us. None of us recognized him, and there were no new cars in the long driveway. Still, we figured it was someone we knew that was messing around with us, so the mood was still light. Tim's family hunted, so he dug out a handheld spotlight and decided to point it at the guy. The light hit the guy's face and he didn't move. His face was totally blank, and we knew pretty quickly that this wasn't a person we knew. He continued to stare directly into the spotlight, which is no easy task, they're incredibly bright. He was wearing a white tank top and khaki shorts, no shoes. We decided we should probably wake up Tim's parents. Tim's dad got up a few minutes later and opened the front door to yell at the guy in the yard. When he did, the guy in the yard quickly turned 180 degrees and faced away from the house. We started to get a little nervous at this point, and Tim got his dad to close the front door. The rest of us were still watching from the loft. It had been several minutes since the guy turned away from the house and Tim's dad was considering calling the cops. Suddenly, the guy started screaming. He still wasn't moving. He was just screaming and facing away from the house. Seconds later, he took off sprinting around the side of the house. We tried to get to different windows to track his movements, but we lost him. Tim's dad called the police, but they didn't find anything when they arrived. We still have no idea where he went. The house was literally surrounded by cornfields. You could see someone coming or going for at least a mile. Needless to say, we didn't sleep that night. The guy's face, his movements, the screams, they still haunt me 15 years later.
At the time, I lived in Missouri. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, I was sound asleep in my bed. It had to be at least after midnight. I suddenly was awoken by a strange man standing over me with his hands around my wrist. The moonlight slightly illuminated the room, and I could kind of see this man's face, mustache. I was overcome with fear, and I started screaming. The man rushed out of my room, and not even a few seconds later, my parents came to see what was wrong. I was bawling, and I told them what happened, and my dad searched the house. Nothing was found. My parents calmed me down, and my mother slept by my side until I fell asleep. That same night, the same thing happened again, but this time, he was a lot gentler with grabbing me. Probably thought if he was gentle, he could kidnap me while I was asleep. I'll never forget the shriek that I made. I was definitely creeped out. The same person was somehow in my home and trying to take me out of it. Once again, he ran away. My parents let me sleep in their bed that night. When I was a teenager, my mom and I were talking about it, and she told me, apparently, when I was outside playing with Dad, same age, she was bathing my 6-month-old brother, and she noticed someone walk past the bathroom quietly. At that point, alarm bells were going off in her head, and she then heard strange noises coming from the bedroom. She wrapped my brother up in a towel and carried him in her arms, and went outside as fast as she could. He had totally tried to bait her to come to the bedroom. My father went into the house and looked everywhere, but there was no one to be found. My parents' theory is that they somehow were able to get in from the back door, which led to the finished basement. What creeps me out the most is that he was so quiet. Everything in the home was untouched. I always think, what would have happened if I had just slept through all of it? I could have been kidnapped, or worse, killed. My parents wanted out of this house. We didn't feel safe. They sold the house ASAP, moved us into a 2-bedroom apartment while our new house was being built. I was sad to move, and I missed my friends, but safety over anything.
Thank you for listening, and thank you again to As the Raven Dreams. Find his channel in the description. If you have any favorite scary stories that you want me to read, tell me in the comments and I'll check it out. I want to remind you that the merch store is up and running. You can buy shirts, posters, jackets, coasters. Yeah. I also think you should join my mailing list. That link is in the description too, next to the merch link. Until next time, always look back. Or don't.